You're listening to Sarah Hagan Backstage, with interviews and insights from years inside the music industry. Join Sarah as she talks with masters of their crafts, finding out what makes them tick, both inside and outside of the music business.
Welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage. My guest today, Jason McGerr, is best known as the drummer in the band Death Cab for Cutie, but he also does a bunch of recording and he teaches. Today, I'm going to talk to Jason about getting back out on the road with Death Cab after such a long time during the pandemic, remote recording, and the changing drum sounds and recording sounds over the years. So come along with me as I catch up with Jason McGerr. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's so awesome to see you.
Likewise, if this is how we get to see each other. No, I got to make it back out to the East Coast.
Yes.
Normally have at least a NAMM show or PASIC or something that we can attend and see each other face to face. But this will have to do for now.
I know, definitely. I think the last time we saw each other, well, was it at NAMM or was it at PASIC before that? Maybe it was PASIC.
Or was it at it might have been when I came through town. We played the Bach Wang Theater. And
yes.
No, it was at NAMM. You're right. It was at NAMM, the last NAMM for both of us.
The last NAMM 2020 before.
It's amazing how many people are not going. Or I think they punted it. Did they push it back? I don't know.
It's in the summer. Yeah, NAMM is in the summer of 2022 now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had I knew going into it that was potentially the last NAMM that I would be going to, I maybe would have done it different. I mean, I was there for 4 days, but we have, not those who have been to NAMM, obviously, who are maybe listening to this can attest to the love-hate relationship with NAMM. But I more miss it now than hate it, just because I can't go, if that makes sense. But it was always just to see you and all the company reps that and the friends and the peers that are usually on the road, but to all wind up in one place for that kind of camaraderie and hang was the best.
Absolutely. It was always like a family reunion. And I love it. And I miss it for that too. I'm one of those people who loves NAMM. And that's why, even though it's exhausting and I would always go home with pneumonia or something,
yeah.
But it was worth it because it was so much fun to see everybody and catch up. And, some years that was maybe my one of the 2 times that I would get to the West Coast. So seeing all you guys was so much fun.
Did you say that you probably spent more time hydrating at the NAMM show than any other 4 or 5 day span in your year? Even
probably.
You'll be completely dehydrated and exhausted by the end of every day with no voice.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. Like you said, it's 4 days, right? But by the end of day 1, my voice would be gone no matter what I did. So yeah, hydrating, cough drops, all that stuff. And, it just never seemed to matter. I think it is the dry air, millions of people, not millions, but literally, I can't even tell you how many people that I would hug or handshake or, during the course of those 4 days, which now that we live in this whole different universe with different regulations on all that stuff, I wonder what it would be like now. Lots of waving and maybe fist bumps.
Separation. That would be a 10th capacity in the building for attendance.
Right. Definitely a different thing. But PASIC is next week. And actually, when this goes live, PASIC will have already happened. So we're talking in the future. But it's live in person. And I just am so excited about it. I just am, just seeing everybody again and seeing drumming and being within the community it's just so exciting. So my hope is that all these things come back.
I can attest to being in person with people. I was recently on the road, and you forgot when you're on stage and doing your thing, even though the audience looked like this, you forgot that pandemic at all. You were just back in the cockpit of this crazy flight, this journey of inspiration and giving back to people the thing that the thing that I've been working my whole life to achieve. And here I was, and it's like I totally forgot that there was ever a problem.
That's amazing.
And I'm sure that going to PASIC, you're going to feel the same way. Like, despite being maybe it'll be anytime I think I go out in a big crowd, I'm cognizant of what's at stake. But I thought about heading out to PASIC this year, but it just didn't work with my schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand what you're talking about, and I feel like I'm excited to get somewhere where it feels like a bit of normalcy, like a bit of pre-pandemic activity. I am so excited about that. I actually went to my first show back after a year and 9 months. I went to go see Nate Smith the other night. Just phenomenal, of course, but it felt like, oh my gosh, this is my old life. Like this is like normal.
Said you went without seeing a show?
A year and 9 months.
A year and 9 months, yeah.
Yeah.
And 9 months ago would not have been a good time to go see a show.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and did you feel that? Like what I was talking about, despite being in the audience, however, whatever you had to present to get into the show for a vaccination card or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you kind of forget for a minute? Were you back in this like...
Yes, I did. I forgot for a moment, just standing next to people and like even though it was definitely people were not on top of each other, everyone was masked. So like there was a little bit of a different feeling to it, but just being with people experiencing the joy of music was like, it felt like normal. It felt like real life. I have a calendar here at the house that is February 2020, and it's whiteboard calendar, and it's almost like a memorial to pre-pandemic life. It has this packed schedule of travel and shows. The last show I saw before the pandemic, which was Stanton Moore with Galactic, is on there. Just everything is on this calendar, and I like have been hesitant to erase it, which is weird. But like it was the strangest thing. I kind of came home from that show, and I was like, I came home from the Nate Smith show last week, and I thought, okay, it's time to erase that. Like it's okay. We're moving forward. There's something now to kind of like move forward into real life again. I don't know.
I forget if I spend too much time at home without being out and about that I even need to put a mask on to go out. Like I'll forget. And part of that is being vaccinated. But I firmly believe, like, whether you're talking about teaching a student or you're an athlete and you're getting back into a sport, that you need to distance yourself from bad habits and bad memories so that you can get into a more positive space. And I think that going out to see live music right now and doing things in public is really important to getting past the sort of headspace that a lot of us are in.
Right.
Much like if you continue to repeat, the wrong sticking of a rudiment, it's gonna ingrain that improper pattern, and that's your default. So I don't want to wind up in a position where my default is to fear people or to fear public or to not want to go support live music. So I we have been very vocally thankful of anyone that has come out to our shows in the past month or so, and reminding people that we had to cancel the last two shows of our tour this fall because of a positive COVID case. We did everything we could to stay in a bubble and testing all the time, and still there was a breakthrough case, and it was towards the end of tour, and we might have been able to make it through the shows, but it just didn't feel responsible to do that, and it felt better to just sit it out. And we tried, we did the best we could, but again, I applaud anyone that's out there, like Nate. I mean, anyone, especially the people that are doing smaller venues and club shows where it's not like a big, you know, spacious room and there's well circulated air, or outdoor shows. It's tough. It's really tough, but
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I applaud you all too for getting out there and getting the live music back. And I was trying my best to get to Red Rocks to see you play Red Rocks with Jules from DW. And
I know, because she was solo. I felt so bad, but I understand why she was solo.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
But,
and I just obviously want to see you play. Wanted that to be my first show. And Red Rocks is like a destination that's on my wish list to get to.
Been there yet?
I've never been.
Really? That surprises me. I mean, when Jules said she'd never been, I was like, no way. You've been in this industry way too long to not go visit at least one artist at Red Rocks.
Right?
I guarantee we'll be back. So you and Jules should make a pact to revisit Red Rock. It was funny. I was in Denver the day before because I'd flown in, and turns out Jules Thomas from DW, if anyone doesn't know who we're talking about, was standing in line to see a comedy show across the street from where I was standing to get some takeout food.
What?
He was actually staying at a hotel a long ways away, but we didn't find out until the next morning that, like, I literally walked by the line that she was standing in, and I didn't even get a chance to see her because of the COVID protocols with being on tour right now. You just can't go and do what you normally do and hang out and see people. And
right.
I mean, super sad, but it's very funny that we were within, 30 feet of each other.
That is funny. Oh my goodness. But, and I think Jules actually introduced us to each other, I'm pretty sure, at some trade show, which we didn't have the chance to work together way back then. You were using different companies' gear, but Jules introduced us, and from that night I was like, okay, we're friends. Like we just have to be friends.
I think you and I and Jules and Garrison all told equally tasteless jokes around at lunch. We were taking a break from the booth, and I think also I've always had a ton of respect for everyone that has worked for any of the companies that I work with and or haven't worked with yet, because of my background in music retail. And there was a time when I went to the NAMM show doing annual orders and taking meetings with people. And I remember the names of the very first reps that we ever had, when I was 19 years old working in a music store, because, they're important people to me back then as they still are today. But I think maybe that's you and I probably saw on that level too. Like, oh, this guy isn't just here to ask me for free shit.
Right.
You also didn't try and poach me from the company I was with at the time. You're like, hey, you ought to try the no, none of that. It was a great thing. So yeah,
absolutely.
Again, back to missing NAMM and good people and career people in the industry.
I know, and that was an important thing to me as well. Was everyone has their preference, and never putting pressure on someone to play something that they weren't into, even at the moment, because people's tastes change over time. And so that was important. Right. But I just, that year, it's so funny because I forgot that we spent lunch telling jokes, and
I was blushing. I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that this was what happened at NAMM with these people. But no, it was awesome. It was great.
That's so funny. And anyone who knows me knows I am the worst at remembering jokes and punchlines. So I'm sure that I did not contribute very well to that conversation, but I'm sure I laughed a lot. So
you contributed more giggle than any of us. That's for sure.
I'm sure I did. I totally imagine that. I can't remember a punchline to save my life. I'm that person who's like, oh, I have this joke. And then I say the punchline first. And then I'm like, oh wait, that's not how it goes. So Yeah, it's not my thing, but I appreciate humor and comedy so much. And especially over the past year and a half, I feel like a lot of what, besides music stuff that I've been consuming on social media or on YouTube, a lot of it's been comedy stuff. And, that's like carried me through. So
Comic relief is really important, really huge.
absolutely, 100%. So going back to what you just talked about, though, about working in retail, um, was that like in high school? You said you were 19, so like high
So
school age?
after high school, I worked retail, like in a little fly fishing shop, because where I'm from, there's a lot of outdoor activities, and fly fishing was one that I was passionate about. And so for the time I was 14 until I guess 20, there was a little overlap with the jobs. Maybe it was more like 14 to 19, I guess. I worked in a fly fishing shop and had the point of sale reference down. I understood how to, sell things in a computer and keep track of inventory. And at the same time, I was doing a little moonlighting and working for my dad, who's a contractor, and just busted my ass working out of town jobs, crazy stuff from steel work to driving backhoes and bulldozers and
Wow.
really heavy lifting shit that was destroying my hands, my feet. And all the while I was trying to be a drummer with a little band in Bellingham, Washington. And I would stop by a lot of out of town work. I would drive through Seattle and stop at American Music. And of course, as every drummer knows, you get to know your local drum shop or the drum shop guy or gal or whoever it is you see for all your supplies and equipment,
Yes.
about equipment. And the guy at that time, his name was Ben Anderson at American Music, said, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving here. If you're interested," he's like, "you obviously know product." I mean, I was the kid that knew cymbal stand model numbers,
Yeah.
all the stick sizes and head codes. And I mean, literally, I would go in and ask at 14, like I thought I was cool for a BA0114 instead of capacitor. And still to this day, when I put in orders with companies for tour supplies or studio supplies, I write down the codes that they usually have to enter into computers.
So helpful.
Driving through Seattle one time, the guy said, "Hey, if you want me to put a word in for you, if you want to interview you, we're looking for someone to work in the drum shop." And I was like, absolutely. It was a low time in my life in terms of just not being very fulfilled with the work I was doing, and I wanted to live in Seattle and make a big push for it. So I stopped by one day after work, literally in oil stained Carhartts, smelled like diesel, big old beard, dirty, my hands were blackened. They couldn't even be clean because of all the work I was doing. And sat down in the manager's office, Kyle Kovalik, and did an interview. And he basically said, "Well, you come recommended. Tell me a little about yourself." And a week later, I moved to Seattle at 19 years old. I was still living at home, left home, never looked back. And I realized that was the moment, I mean, sure, I was able to play in bands and do some studio sessions and do gigs by the time I was 15 on a local level, but getting to a place like Seattle and getting into, the circles of what was happening in Seattle in 1994.
Wow.
Was a pretty rad time to be there at a music store. I mean, because Grohl was still coming to the shop and sit down and try stuff out, even though he didn't have to. Matt Cameron was around, and Matt Chamberlain had recently moved to Seattle, and he was like bringing in flyers, like looking for students, and like, of course, tore a piece of paper off and went and hung out with him, and
I love it.
jammed with him. And so it was a really great place to be at 19 years old. I was able to walk to work. I scored what would be a legendary low rent price for Seattle standards. $187.50 is what I paid for a room in a house that was, yeah, right. We're talking $187 at a room in a house, and I walked to work.
Wow.
I have to have a car, and I mean, I really lucked out. But over the course of a year of being there in the music store, met a lot of people. I had studied previously. I was driving back and forth to study at the Seattle Drum School.
Mm-hmm.
Once they found out I had moved to Seattle, they said, "Hey, if you have any students, since you know the curriculum, you're welcome to. We'll give you a room and you can start teaching here." And so I started doing that, and I was getting students through American music, and yeah, the rest just kind of snowballed from there. In terms of my moving out, taking a step forward into more of the music industry, which is when I started going to NAMM. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
so great.
it goes on and on and on, a lot of details, but I think everyone can relate to that, whatever that step was that they took, whether that's with a band or at a music store or music school or an audition, whatever. That was my step for sure.
That's so great. And a lot of times for a lot of people, that step is like a little bit scary.
Of course.
Right?
Terrifying. I mean, because I had no money, when I moved down there, I lucked out at the rent, but I had this whole plan. I was like, Mom, I had a van, and I was like, I'm just going to park outside Meadowbrook Pool. That way I can exercise and shower every morning, and then I'll just go to work, and I won't have to pay rent. I mean, when the world is your oyster.
But it just shows that like you're willing to do what it takes to follow that dream that you had. And I think I always say, like, take the leap, take the chance.
Sure.
Yeah, because you don't know. You never know, and you only know what you'll continue doing if you don't take the chance, if you don't follow, what it is that's in your heart. You could go back and find another job in driving a backhoe if you had to. But, you'll never know if you could have made it, and you're like proof that you can make it. So
well, and I mean, to fast track a little bit, I was in Seattle by the time I was 19, but then I was back and forth between Bellingham, Seattle, to just the music store. You might hear my pug snoring now. Sorry about that.
That's great.
It's not me. It's nothing I ate. It's the pug. I was back and forth between Seattle and Bellingham, and I worked at a few different music stores. A place called Strictly Percussion. I don't know if you remember them or not.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Trading Musician was another spot that I worked. All part-time because I was trying to teach the rest of it, the other part-time. And then it wasn't until 2000, right around 2000, I guess, that I moved down to Seattle for a longer period and started teaching like really full time at Seattle Drum School. And I had enough students that I could have continued to do that. I was really passionate about it. I had some students come in that were professional players, or some that were young that went on to be professional players. There's a lot of reward in working with students for years at a time, which at that point, I had students that I started when they were 5, and they worked with me till they were 17 or 18. But Death Cab was in Bellingham, and there was 2 separate occasions that they had asked me to fill in for them in between drummers. And the first 2 times I said no because of what I had going on, whether it was another band or the teaching. And they were still driving around a crappy van, and they were getting a lot of press and like on an upward trajectory. But I said no twice. And it wasn't until Transatlanticism, their 4th record, that I realized that like my world wasn't going to change dramatically. Like I had maybe reached a glass ceiling with the teaching at the drum school, and the bands that I was playing in around Seattle, where I was into them. I had friendships. Music was engaging, but there was not a lot of commercial success sort of potential. And I think I wanted a little bit more than that. And basically I wound up in a rehearsal with the bass player from Death Cab, who I'd played in a band with previously, like 5 or 6 years before that, and said he and I were filling in for another band. And I just told him one night after rehearsal, he and I were just hanging out, and they said, "You need to use me for your next record." And
That's great.
It was one of the tallest moments in my life where I had to literally stand as tall as I could, find as much courage and pride, because I realized by saying that what I was doing was, putting it in other words, I think I could do better than who you currently have playing the drum. And it is not in my nature. But it was, I guess, another way to look at it is that, if you're doing justice for a student, you're not going to tell a student that what they're doing is great if it's not great.
Sure.
And so I was, because of the friendship and the history I had, and we they had asked me twice before, so it wasn't like I was just coming in like Keith Moon to like knock somebody over and tear apart the drum set. It was an honest, like, I think I could help you guys be a really good band. And I think it was also at a time when they were struggling a little bit internally with the chemistry of everyone who was in the band, and maybe the drummer might have been part of that. I don't know for sure, but it was also just before they were about to make a record, so it was good timing. But I had to say no twice. I had to be at a certain point in my life where I was ready to take that leap of faith, like you said, like find the courage and just be like, why not? I'm just going to speak my mind here. And I went for it. And obviously that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because that was, October of 2002.
Wow.
So almost 20 years.
Wow. That's amazing. And and what you've all done together since then is just pretty incredible. And you continue to make music. You continue to make really great music. And I'm just such a fan. I feel so happy to have seen you all on that tour, which I think that might have been 2019 when you came through the Wang Theater. Actually, that night, the show was so great. And on the way home, I was in a crazy accident on the highway. If you remember that.
Remember that.
Right?
I totally remember that. You and Matt both. Your husband.
Yeah.
All right.
A car spun around on the highway and then hit us head on, which was really crazy.
We blamed it on the name. Blamed it proximity to the band name.
Right. Well, that's a little frightening, but I only say this because and we were fine and things were okay. Everyone involved was fine. The people in the other vehicle were okay as well, which is crazy that everything was fine. But you were so great. You came to my office the next day and made me coffee. You're like, I'm coming to see you and I'm going to make you coffee at your desk. And you brought all the things that you needed to make the coffee. Yeah. And that was just the sweetest thing.
You did a pour over, right?
Yes.
Was I with anyone or did I come solo on that trip?
No, who were you with?
I wasn't with Ronnie, was I? Or was I with Rob?
That's right. It was you and Rob. Yes. Yeah, yes. Oh my goodness. It feels like an entire lifetime ago. But no, you were with Rob. You both came. I remember now. And it was so, so sweet. I think I was a little bit in a daze from everything that had happened.
I remember that. Yeah. You were, I don't know if you were, your neck was a little bit tweaked or
yeah, definitely.
Your back was tight or something like that. But
yes.
Remember Rob that talked you into, I offered you coffee and you're like, I don't know. I think initially, and Rob was like, no, you should let him make you a pour over. But
yes.
Traveling with coffee. That's something that Mark Julian and I talk about all the time. It's survival, right? We all need our creature comfort. Some people bring pillows. Some people bring pour over kits.
Absolutely. Yes. I was just so impressed by the rig that you had, the traveling rig that you had. It was pretty great.
You got hand ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was so,
even if it sucked, you were really kind in terms of sipping it. Even though
it was so good. It was so good. I was just I was very impressed. I was like, okay, I need to get on my coffee game. And I did not get on my coffee game, but maybe.
Life's busy. It's hard to
You know, yeah, life has been so busy. It's so crazy since then, but not that it isn't always. But that was very, very sweet. But yeah, I was so happy to see you guys on that tour, and it was just incredible.
It's a great sounding room.
It was, oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite places to see a show in Boston. It's just, not only is it beautiful, but like the sound, you know, it's built for sound, and it's just, yeah, the theater. It's the place where they have like the productions, you know, the Nutcracker around Christmas time and all that stuff. So
dynamics are like super,
perfect.
like
Yeah.
yeah. I remember. I mean, it's sad to say that we often judge how well a show goes or is based on room acoustics, but it's true. I mean, if you have a room that you can, you know, that's at your fingertips, like you can be as
Yes.
dynamic as you want, you obviously you have a better show versus not having any bearings for where a wall is. We a few weeks ago we opened for the Foo Fighters, opening the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, which they just did. It was the old Key Arena, which was where the Sonics played, and Amazon bought it and turned it into a zero emission, negative emission building. That's why it's called Climate Pledge Arena, but it's beautiful inside. But holy crap, I went up for a line check and hit my bass drum, and it was like 3 seconds later, and you know, you hit your snare drum, and it doesn't matter how high you have it tuned, it just sounds like an 8-inch field drum, you know.
Wow.
It's easy. And I think that it's, don't get me wrong, I mean, playing in a space like that, 17,000 people is incredible, but the acoustic experience can just be a bummer, you know, unless you set up your gear to be in a space like that. Like Taylor Hawkins had like a marching, I think he had a flam slam snare drum head, and if he had cranked it any more, like the tension rods would have pulled the lugs off of the shell. And then on top of that, he had some crazy paper towel covered with gaff tape with contact cement, like on top of the head. Something that drum tech Tim Ward configured. Maybe I just let a secret out of the bag. But
No.
when I was up there on the riser with Taylor, he was like, check this out. And he hit it. And I was like, holy shit. I felt like I was in a marching competition. It was so sharp and so
Wow.
bright. But then you go up front, you know, and I was at front of house when they were doing their sound check, and it sounded like pure magic, like a totally different drum, you know.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's so great.
Going to say at room acoustics, they can mess with your head big time. And I've always been impressed by, as you mentioned his name earlier, a guy like Nate Smith and the dynamics that he has like at his disposal. And I've tried for years to employ those dynamics, and it's just tough when you get in some of those big rooms. But I think a lot of drummers who do a range of touring from small intimate venues to larger venues would say the same thing. It's crazy. So when you do get in a big beautiful room like the Buckwang, it's incredible. You want to stay there. You want to do like a multiple night stand at a place like that.
Yes. Yeah. And actually they've been doing multiple night shows, like mini residencies lately. I've been seeing, I haven't seen a show there. Actually, I haven't seen a show there since that show. But they do that lately, like mini residencies, which I think is great. But speaking of sound, you know, I think of you as very, very specific with your sound and very creative as well. So, you know, you'll post a video and you have like a handkerchief over a drum or different ways to dampen, and always seem to have like a new unique way to make the sound that you need to make.
It's I'm trying to think if that stems from me trying to be creative or if it stems from me being hyper aware of how much drum sounds have changed over the years. I think it's both. I mean, when I first started playing the drums with the goal of like just exploring, like drum set was still new, right? Like I put together what I could, and maybe that meant if I wanted 3 toms up top, that I had a snare drum with the wires off on a stand really high. Like you did what you could to find a lane or a path that helped you be creative. But one thing I always used to do when I sat down is I would sit down and start like this. I would say to myself, I'm going to play something that I've never played before, that I've never heard before. And I would start like rolls in reverse, or I would, left hand on the hat, or instead of, keeping time where your bass drum is marking in normal spots, it would be the hi-hat foot, or it would be whatever I play one direction, I would look at the piece of music as a mirror and play it backwards. So it would be like a, like a Rorschach kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And I think that sonically I've carried that theme whenever I'm engineering here at my desk. I want to get away from what's predictable, but I don't want to. But my foot is on the home plate always of predictability. So I think that you need to, when you're making music, when you're creating a part, when you're playing time, whatever, that you need to have it be immediately recognizable to the general public. But the more layers of depth and complexity you have in it, to me, the more you're going to define your sound and who you are. So I'm not the first person to put a tackle towel or a t-shirt or something like that on top of the drum, or a piece of duct tape, or a tambourine, or a piece of metal, or whatever. But very early on, I was putting Keplinger pieces of metal. Greg still lives in Seattle, but Greg Keplinger had these. I'm going to get one. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
So every time Greg Keplinger would make a snare drum, he would roll the metal of the shell, and there would be some left over in the shell. Cut that and make a weld to have the perfect round snare drum. So he would have these pieces of metal. This was like basically the top of the fold, and he would have these lying around his house. And like this one here still says 1996 from the first brass drum that he ever made me. And I was like, what are you going to do with that piece? And he's like, I don't know. I'd put it on a drum, or I think he hammered a little, or maybe he hadn't. I put it on a drum, and it had this kind of warbly sound. I'll play it for you right now just because we're having fun in your podcast. These pieces of metal wound up on drums, so they had like warbly sounds. And I started tracking with those sounds, and people started taking an interest in what I was doing. I was like, all right, so I guess finding weird shit to put into your grooves is a good thing. And again, I just kept on that path. So whether you're engineering or you're preparing drums with just simple means of a towel or a piece of paper or a big fat snare drum, whatever, I think that's really important to try, because so many listeners these days on the radio haven't grown up with traditional drum sounds.
Yes.
Like you and I can put on a record and listen to Omar Hakim or Steve Gadd or Matt Cameron or whomever, and recognize those sounds and know who those drummers are.
Absolutely.
They did that with a set of traditional sounds that they had at that time, but starting who knows when everybody started making records in their bedroom by dragging and dropping loops, and some of them sounded proper and some of them sounded improper. Like the expectations for listeners these days are not those traditional drum sounds. And that's not to dismiss anything that, the legends have done for us. I want Dennis Chambers to continue to sound like Dennis Chambers.
Yes, please.
But a lot of the producers and artists that I work with these days are wanting to hear something different.
Absolutely.
Like I can't, like no matter how good of a traditional drum sound I can record in my room, there's no guarantee that that's going to get me work. And as a matter of fact, there's a teaser just that came out today, which you will love. There's an artist named Lennon Stella, a Canadian artist, a really talented singer, who I got to play on a track that is it'll be the second sort of single for her upcoming album. And the drum sound is Zildjian L80s are the cymbals.
Wow.
And the kit is a mesh head kit, Remo silent stroke heads. And then after playing that practice kit, which you've seen me use in like videos,
Yeah.
when you hear this on her record, you're going to be like, what?
Wow.
Like, because nowadays you could take your drum sounds and you can track them however you want, and then sample support and like add in. So I could record a bass drum, a real bass drum, and layer it with a silent stroke head and give it this dual tone presence. And when you hear the L80 hi-hats come in the track, it's like, what is that sound? Is it programmed? Is it, but it's, again, I'm not going to give away all the secrets and sauce, but it's how I prepared and the sticks that I chose. And when I heard back from the producer, I had sent him this loop along with several others, and it's just one that he listened to, gravitated towards, and they ended up writing the song. I'm not going to say it's my fault or like I'm responsible for this tune, but it ended up being an essential part of the song, and he wanted to make sure that I was cool with them using it. I was like, totally. But if it wasn't for me going down the path of like, how can I be untraditional in terms of a presentation of my art? If I didn't go down that path, this song wouldn't be in the world. So as much as I want to get behind every company's traditionally made products, I can't stress enough to young drummers. I know that a lot of drummers are doing this. I feel like I'm a dinosaur in the eyes of most of the kids playing these days, but it's important to stretch and to not just technically but sonically present yourself in a way that's fresh. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think that like you touched on that, the fact that we grew up listening to music that was tracked live, and like all the band was like in a room together playing to tape. And the sound is just such a different thing. Like when I started playing drums, the options were limited, and it didn't seem that way back then because there were tons of options, but as far as like the materials and how things were made, and we didn't have, we had like the zero rings, right, for the drums. We didn't have things like big fat snare drum or all these so many options for like, the L80s, the silent stroke heads, all the different head options now, it's just all of that stuff. It's incredible.
Stick options too. Yeah.
Stick options. Yeah. Cymbal options. You would never, all the cymbal sounds that exist nowadays. All of the effect symbols and the things that aren't even like we wouldn't have thought of as symbols. Like,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like bald man percussion. Like there's all kinds of crazy
all that stuff.
Another in talking about prepared drummers, like I do as much as I can to tweak a very basic drum set, a 4-piece kit, but with all the different head overlays, big fat snare drum, roots, EQ, towels, tape, shells, different sticks and rods, whatever. Obviously, we could take that one kit and make a dozen or more different drum sounds out of it.
Yes.
And same thing with plugins and a lot of weird outboard gear these days for recording. And I mean, a kid can have one crappy microphone and record his drum set or her drum set and put it into a computer and run it through any number of processing signals, and all of a sudden they have a vibe and someone's writing a song on it. But I wanted to not forget about Glenn Cochie in terms of talking about being inspired by drummers.
Oh yes.
Prepare gear. And I mean I saw Wilco. I mean, I've known Glenn since we met for MD Fest 2006, I think, when both of us wound up at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center and wondered what the hell we were doing there with Ronald Bruner Jr. and Stuart Copeland and Aaron Spears and the whole Gospel Summit. And
Oh, it was
we were
incredible.
like two little scared boys, like holding each other like in the corner because we didn't know why we were there.
Oh no.
We were band guys. We're like, what? But really, Glenn needed to be there because he had the monkey chant like dialed and ready to go, and Springs coming out of the center. I was like, who is this guy?
Yes.
I mean, I knew Wilco, but I hadn't spent much time with Glenn as a person. But and seeing Wilco a month ago here in town, and how often he changed just the sticks or the mallets or whatever shape he was making on a drum set over the course of a night. It was incredible. And again, I think that music these days, because it's coming from laptops and loops and samples and all kinds of stuff, like what's interesting is how it's being presented, and it is not being presented the same way every time or in the form of a traditional instrument. It just isn't. So I got to fight really hard and remind myself, as much as I love the sound of drums out of the box the way that I first heard them in the 80s, like,
yes,
that's not the thing that is turning the heads of listeners, producers, the industry. So
sure. Yeah, but it's so smart. It's so smart of you to recognize that and to, adjust and do what's necessary now, explore what's necessary now. And that's not always easy either. But I agree with you. And artists like Glenn as well. I think of him anytime I see something new percussive wise, I just think, ooh, Glenn would like that. Or I wonder if Glenn's using that. I was just texting with him the other day. There's one thing on his kit that I think of all the time when I think of Glenn is he has the fruit basket thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? He has this like wire fruit basket, right? Yeah. There was a wedding gift when he got married, and of course I'm like, your wife is so sweet to just feel like here's, this wedding gift, but now it's a percussive instrument. But I think of him all the time with stuff like that, because it is so his mind just works in that way where he thinks of things. And I think a lot of percussionists think of things like anything can make noise and be tapped on. But like to incorporate it into modern music, I think is an incredible talent. And that's why I brought it up with you, because I do see you doing things like that. And I love that you brought out those pieces of metal, because that's like the perfect example.
Well, to me, whatever we need to do to tap into the most inspired space.
Mm-hmm.
And another simple metaphor for it is like, sometimes you're hungry and you want to eat food and you don't know what you want to eat. You just not that satisfying just because you need sustenance and you don't sleep well or whatever. It's like, it's not like an elative meal. It's not like you go out to a place that has curated a course of food that makes you have a psychological reaction to what you're doing. Like, you get emotional because the food is so good. Mm-hmm. I don't think that I ever want to play anything. I don't think that anything that I record for somebody has ever left my studio unemotional or inspired in that way. Like, if I'm just going through the motions, I mean, sure, I've been asked to do can you just do a 4 on the floor and copy this exact programming? Sure, you got it. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you that I sift through the rack of 25 snare drums over here to find the right sound, what I think is the right option. But the point is that you can tap into inspiration no matter what you're doing, whether it's on a basketball court or on the slopes or with your partner or with your kids, or a brand new book or a special meal or just whatever, stepping outside to see the blue sky and smell the air. Like, those moments of pure intoxication in terms of inspiration and feeling like your eyes are wide open and you're limitless, those can be found in something other than your normal drum sound, right? Or your sticks. Yes. They put you in a different place. It's a different lens, and a lot of us, I think, are guilty of using the same writing tools or looking through the same lens.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that those people will have as much resonance. That's all.
Sure. Yeah, I love thinking about that. Like when you have those experiences when your eyes are wide open, and not only having those experiences, but recognizing them when they're happening, I think is like the greatest gift ever. Like acknowledging that you just unlocked a new part
Right.
of your brain. I don't know. That's how I describe it, but
It takes practice. I don't
yeah.
think that's an easy. I don't think we're guaranteed that kind of. It's not like you get out of bed and there's a key on your bedside table to unlock those doors. Like at all, it really takes practice, and that often means a lot of discomfort.
Yes.
And that's okay too. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I agree with you too. I think on the other side of the discomfort, that's when those moments happen.
Agreed.
Right? They don't come by just, getting up and doing the same thing every day, day in, day out. It comes when you put when you take the risk, or when you do something that's like a little bit scary or unfamiliar. And I think that's when those moments come, like after the fact. You recognize your own capacity for whatever it was.
Well, you're tapping into that fight or flight thing too,
Right.
Same way that, if a fast car was coming towards your kid, you would break your record for sprinting speed, right? You would make sure that they didn't get hurt. And that's why live performances are still so intoxicating. That's why records that were made on tape, 50, 60, 70 years ago still hold up, because they were people tapping into those moments.
Yes.
A lot of that has been lost. Not to say that like the computer can't be an incredibly useful tool. There's a lot of, I think that happy accidents come pretty fast in the world of, computer recording. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I try and convey to my students all the time. Like, we talk about the psychology of learning and what happens when they're practicing, and I'm having them on a screen. It's been on screen, it hasn't been on in person lately, but when they are learning something new, and I'm hearing the pitfalls and the stumbling blocks, like we talk about what those are and why they're happening. Just like, it's not uncommon for a student to like make connections and play a bar or two right the way that it's written or the way that it's intended, and then as soon as it's over, they stop. They're sort of, it's almost like, I was joking with one student who played this exercise. It took him all lesson to play this really difficult pattern, and as soon as he made it through, of course he couldn't make it past bar one. And I made a joke. I was like, dude, you were cruising down the street, you just stopped, you got out of your car to look around to make sure that you actually just drove by. Like, did that just happen? There was this whole psychological, like, don't overthink it, don't be afraid of that moment. It's like unknown, uncharted territory, whether we're creating something new or in a live setting, but trying to stay focused and not afraid of like the dark, basically.
Yeah.
Is where all that magic really lies. That's where the greatest performances, best vocal takes, like all that stuff comes from, is like, unharnessed, pure first time events.
I love that analogy. That's perfect. And I think like the way what you just said made me think about rock climbing, or or climbing a ladder even. And if you're focusing on where you're going and what you're doing, you can go as high as you want, right? If you look down to see where you are or where you've been, that's when things go wrong. That's when you just, right? But yeah, if you're in that moment, you're focused on what you're doing and looking ahead, that's when you make it. You make it to the top. You complete it, and then I think about that. Indoor rock climbing in particular is one of my favorite things in the world. And I find that, if I'm just focused and I'm going. Like that's where I'm going. I'm going up and on the next move, and you just make it. That's what you do.
Well, there's no Command Z or Apple Z when you're rock climbing.
Right. That is true.
You can't undo. I think that we stop ourselves from performing, especially in a studio, because we know that we can easily just go back and do it again.
Sure.
None of that practice makes us better, really.
Right.
It does to some extent, but it's not the same as committing.
Mm-hmm.
I always play way better after a tour. When I come home and record, if I've just been on tour, it's like, first takes of everything, like blown through, because it's not because my hands and feet are stronger. It's because my brain is used to doing the focus thing and just clicking a song off and going and not stop.
Yeah.
Just like I'm sure if you were climbing over a real rock wall, like literally above, a death-defying fall, like you would not lose your focus.
You would do what it takes, right?
To more strength. You'd be doing like one finger pull-ups on the ledge. You'd be
right. I'm picturing Mission Impossible, like that rock climbing scene that made my stomach flip upside down.
I'm shaky thinking about
right? I can't think about that.
I mean, I don't want anyone to get the opinion or the impression I'm like a freak for fear. But
no.
yeah, it's all about just tapping into the right spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I like, indoor rock climbing is great. You're tethered. You are, you
got mats.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's definitely a safety factor there. So yeah, we're not climbing over above a crevice with no ropes, but it's a good analogy. Yeah, and I just, thinking back to the quarantine and pandemic and all of that, I know where you are right now is a really great setup to spend some time. But I'm sure you were really excited to get back out on the road and get those shows out there and play some live music. And it had to have been refreshing to just, like you said, feel like it was a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah, we we just did a short run because we're working on a new record right now. So it was just a little burst of getting out there. And even though it was just a handful of shows, I think we did like 10 shows over the course of 6 weeks, kind of spread out. It was, again, counting off a song, walking on stage, clicking off a tune, was if the world never had a problem. And that's not meant to sound callous, because obviously there's been nothing but tragedy with this pandemic. But the good thing that has come about is, I think, thankfulness for what we do have and what we can't do, and that was very evident being on the road and playing shows. But we didn't do the normal tour stuff where you get to hang and see people and
right.
Record shop and go out to eat at restaurants you missed. It was a lot more. It was bubble touring, COVID protocol touring, but it was totally worth it. And yeah, it was fantastic to be out there.
So good.
And I get the same story from everyone who's out there right now, that I stay in touch with.
Absolutely.
Back out on the road.
Yeah. And what is so you have an album that you're working on right now? And is that like a 2022 release?
It'll be a 22 release. Yep. It's all, I mean, there's always 11th hour writing, but I think majority of it is written, and we've rehearsed and done pre-production. And we spent the last year and a half doing this really creative, not like it's a brand new idea, but we've just been doing a lot of file sharing. So on a Monday, someone will start a seed of an idea and they'll pass it to the next band member, and then they pass it to the next band member. And by Friday, somebody's mixing, and we all take turns mixing and contributing, but each person gets to work on their own time. Like only they're producing the track. And that also might mean that like there are some brutal edits for whoever did something the day before or rewrite.
Sure.
It's always a surprise. And so literally for the past year and a half, we've been doing this. Not every single week. There's been breaks, but it has yielded a whole lot of material that we've all equally contributed to. I mean, I'm not writing lyrics. It's, everyone does their role, but I've also written music as well, and the band has written either with that or used it as just a wink or a nod to write their own parts. But there is a lot of material. I think we could have 3 records if we really wanted, but that doesn't mean good. So fortunately, though, I feel like there's enough material that we're ready to hit record for real in about 4 weeks.
Wow.
We're going to be actually committing, and hopefully we'll be wrapped and ready to have it out before too long in 22.
Super exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting after all this time. I mean, it was just good. I mean, we took a full year off of seeing each other and playing in a room together.
Yeah.
We, looked each other eye to eye, made it happen. And that was an amazing feeling. But it was also like old hat. I was like, oh, right. Like no time's passed at all because we've been a band a long time, but.
Absolutely. It's like family. So,
yeah.
Similar with family through the pandemic where people have been, apart for so long and just.
Well, do you consider your hands and your feet family too? Because trying to get my hands and my feet to arrive at the same level, my brain automatically goes to like how I felt playing at the end of the last album cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like a full year off and play again. It was a little like like trying to catch my breath a little bit.
Right.
It came back pretty quick.
Right. And I've been hearing that from everyone. Like same thing. Like not even just the hands and the feet, but like the cardio. Like,
yeah. I mean, thankfully we've all stayed in good shape. No one has put on the COVID-15 or let themselves slip. If anything, I think most of us are probably in the best shape of our life. That's because we've had time to work at it.
Right. Well, that's a whole other thing. I think that a lot of people have had the time to like get themselves in shape or in better shape too. And it's just been, how did you spend the time, right? Like, and speaking of that, were you doing like remote lessons through this time and all of that? Just kind of,
I did.
Keeping on that.
I did a lot. I've done a lot of remote session work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Zoom lessons, and I'm staying busy. I mean, it's funny. I've used my studio more in the past year and a half. We've been in this house for 11 years. I've used it more in the past year than I did in the first decade that we were here.
I bet.
I mean, the studio hasn't changed that much. It's pretty much looked the same, other than some drum additions and some new outboard gear. But when I was on tour all the time with Death Cab, I have a wife and 2 kids, and the last thing I wanted to do after a 4, 5, 6 week tour, or 8 months out of 12 being on the road, was to come home and be like, really great to see you all again. I'm gonna be in the studio. Don't bother me. Lock myself in my basement. I just did not do that, and so there wasn't a lot of, I maybe did 1 or 2 records a year.
Wow.
The first decade that I was, unless I was on the road, like, and being pulled into studios, it was very much Death Cab time and or family time.
Mm-hmm.
Touring stopped, and it was also in between album cycles, and we knew we were going to be taking some time off. I was like, man, I need to step up and do a lot of work. So I just put it out there that I was available and connected with producers that I knew, and fortunately they kept me busy, and I did some licensing music, and probably did a dozen records in the past year.
So great.
On top of that, a bunch of random singles and one-offs, and then I also was teaching maybe 2 or 3 days a week at the most. Not super busy, but enough to enough to be there for people and help them advance a little bit, and still leave time for my own family and my own life. But because I didn't really leave this house a lot, especially in 2020, I was in the studio every single day, which has been a great, I think my engineering and skills have improved a lot in terms of studio stuff. I'm hoping that will pay off when it comes time to go work for X name producer in a few weeks. But
absolutely, that's great.
Yeah, it's been the blessing of dare I say, it's been the blessing of this pandemic. But it forced me to work, and thankfully, I had built a commercial studio years ago, so I wasn't new to, and I've been engineering for a while, like maybe 2004. But I'm so glad that I built this place when we moved in, because finding out about all these drummers that were touring players that didn't have a real place to practice, or they were scrambling to put together home recording setups, or like the teaching thing, like I'm set up with multiple cameras and people are getting my studio sound, not just Zoom or computer, mic, but they're actually getting my stereo mix. And so we can screen share, if I have a student that's interested in recording themselves better at home, whether that's for social media content or doing remote session work, we can actually do a lesson where, I'm screen sharing with them, turning around like, okay, I'm the student. I want you to give me something to play. Give me an idea and I'll play to it, and I'll play and I'll record, and then I'll share my screen and show them what I just did and be like, here's what I did. And maybe I'll play it solid and maybe I'll play it super loose, and I'll kind of break it down, and we'll say, what could I have done better?
Right.
How's this sounding to you? And then I'll intentionally move some things around. Like I'll have a snare drum bottom mic cranked up and it's out of phase, not to get all super nerdy, but I do get into, with the lessons, a lot of the technical aspect of how to record drums and how to edit and make them really think about that side of it. So because of the multiple cameras and being able to show different angles and work through a situation like that. And it's the same thing if I'm working remotely with a producer, they can take over my screen and adjust levels. And
that is super cool, actually. I mean, that's something that students need to know nowadays that, 10, 15 years ago wasn't even a thing. So that's incredible.
Well, I knew that it was going to be important when, at the beginning of the pandemic, I went to go order a USB to HDMI capture dongle, and they were back ordered for like 6 months because
right.
wanted to be doing the same thing from home. So again, the fact that I had enough foresight unknowingly to build a place that I could work, record, teach, mix, like all things from home, was, godsend. Like if I was scrambling to build this place without steady income and with as expensive as resources are these days, I'd be bumming. But I was ready to walk into a studio and hit my space bar the second the day the world shut down. Which
so really great.
Cool. Yeah. Not bragging. I'm saying,
No, for sure. You're grateful. I mean, that's important. Absolutely. And I'm excited for your, for the projects that you're working on, the new album for next year, and then for you to get back on the road and see you play. I can't wait for that. And then
I don't even know what traveling's like anymore.
I know. I know. Heading out and for some travel over the next couple of months for work stuff again. And I'm kind of like, okay, how is this going to feel? We'll see. But it's so great though to see you and see all of the things that you're doing right now and how you've made it through and been able to thrive through this time and come out on the other side and feel really grateful. And I think it's all we can ask for.
Same to you. It's really great to see you and to see that you're set up the way that you are and talking to so many people who've been a big part of your life. And we're all learning a lot. You're open and you're pulling back the curtain on a lot of musicians and their ways of going about their days, and it's been very inspiring to see. unless you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And before long, we will be back having lunch together, telling jokes. Or you telling jokes and me laughing at them.
Start remembering the punchline now, okay?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm going to start practicing now. So, when that happens, I'll be able to come to the table with something better.
You'll impress all of us.
Thank you so much, Jason. I so appreciate your time today and cannot wait to see what's on the horizon for you.
Thank you very much. Have a great time at PASIC.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us each Tuesday for new episodes of Sarah Hagan Backstage.